Controversial topic, seeing as you mentioned it. Chris, you had some thoughts about that.
Well, way back in the early days, I tried an experiment where I took the students into a computer lab and we anonymized all of their communication and asked them some questions about their feelings about people of different races. And I had done enough scaffolding and preparation for how these things had gone in other settings where I expected them to nullify some of the studies we'd read that showed that people became much more racist if they weren't accountable by name. And they became much more racist. And it was a very disturbing moment in using an affordance of technology to show that the internet is not always your friend. And we had to have a lot of conversation afterwards. And one thing we didn't know about what happened was what the intentions of people posting things that we all would have agreed in another setting were inappropriate ways to communicate with one another. We don't know if they were being intentionally racist. We don't know if they were being intentionally provocative. We don't know what they were doing, and no one ever, in our face-to-face coming back together in a non-anonymous situation, ever explained why what had happened. And it was very disturbing. Now, Denise, I know you've also done research on how professors of color sometimes don't self-identify as people of color because there's a way to preserve. Well, I probably want to say something.
Yes, that is coming out of the research that I did. We found that professors of color very often see it as, well, maybe if I don't self-identify. And then there are students who think if I don't self-identify. So then they're wondering, all right, if we're going to talk about controversial, challenging topics around identity, how much of me needs to be there? And would that change the way the students react to me? Will they think that I have an agenda? Will they think that I would agree with them? Would I disagree with them? And I found that pretending that doesn't exist doesn't really work. It doesn't work well for me. But making that very transparent and making that very clear, and then trying to talk about that. And for students in face-to-face courses, I have experienced meltdowns, crying, leaving, coming back, all sorts of issues around processing these challenging topics. And online, I find because they do have that buffer, they're able to do that in a way that maybe people aren't feeling. Maybe they're crying at home, but at least they're not, they're managing to process that better. They can step away and then they can rejoin, and that people can feel that I can say something. I'm not sitting knee to knee with you, looking you in the eye, and that they do tend to check each other because it isn't anonymous. They do tend to check each other in terms of letting things fly that they know would not be appropriate.
And I've also found in these classes that have bonded fairly well that when they sense that someone is holding back, they will directly say to that person, I feel like given some of your forum posts, you probably have more to say than you're saying. Please go ahead. And so there's a kind of invitational quality to bring something out that I think you feel like we might be telling you not to bring out because we actually want to be able to deal with this. So I think there's a very interesting kind of almost elasticity where sometimes the groups will decide not to tread too far into something, and other times they seem to decide they don't want this to be a diplomatic space. They actually want it to be a contentious and difficult space, and they're willing to stay with one another through it.